We now have the full picture of the Grand Tournament. All 132 cards have been revealed, and I'm going to quickly run through all of them and sort them into the category of great, good, bad, or we can toss some of the cards right into the right side here, which is trash, incinerator, furnace, whatever you want to call it. I should mention that even though they're labeled great, good, and bad, good stands for good and interesting, and bad stands for bad and interesting, which is my way of saying, okay, this card is bad, but it has like a little bit of potential, it's interesting enough that it might work. This is going to be a very abbreviated review. If you want the more in-depth reviews, you can see all of the other videos where I reviewed the cards. Some of them are going to change in value now that I've seen all of the cards. So let's get started. Argent Horse Rider. That is a great card. Comparable Wolf Rider, -1 attack for charge. Excellent. Argent Watchman. Let's throw that in the trash here. Stats are bad. Armored Warhorse, a 5/3 for charge only for control decks with Joust. Trash. Wolfram Shield, a 6 mana 0/9 due to the way that minion combat works. Trash. Bone Guard Lieutenant, 2 mana 3/2 with a very minor Inspire effect. Turns out that that's not strong enough. Trash. 7 mana 5/9. We'll toss that over there. Jilmul. This one, I'm not going to quite put in the great category. I think it has potential. I think it might be a bit too slow. In my original review I said like, too slow, doesn't really even counter patron, but I think it's a good card in the dragon, and it does have potential. Clockwork Knight, this one is borderline trash, but like it has some potential to maybe making it in those mech decks. Don't think they'll run this, but I'll put it in the maybe. Coliseum Manager can go manage the trash heap. Crowd favorite, 4 mana 4/4. Questing Adventure isn't being played. A Battlecry deck isn't going to come up. Rip, rip. A 3 mana 3/3. Let's toss that in the trash. 4 mana 5/4. Power creep, but still trash. Which doesn't make it power creep. If you wanted the entire power creep story, I encourage you to watch the Trump Talks episode. This one's really promising. Really good stats, 3 mana 3/4, and a really strong ability. Not really sure what deck is going to be able to make use of it, which makes me want to almost put it into the good column with potential, but it's so strong that I'm just going to put it in the great side here. Fencing Coach, really exciting. This is the card that enables a lot of the bigger cards with heavy inspires, like summon a legendary, or something like your next card you draw cost 0. Really, really good card to put in this set. And if you use the hero power for the 2 mana, and you usually would if you're about to play an Inspire, this is like a 1 mana 2/2. It's really good. This Light Bane, unlike the Dark Bane, I think there's a little less potential for it because I think dealing 3 damage to a random enemy is stronger of an effect, so I'm just going to put Fiola in the good, but has potential instead. At the end of the sorting, I will make sure to spread them out, but because of how messy it would get early on, I have to stack them on early. Flame Juggler. I'm a little torn on whether or not to put this in the trash heap or the bad pile, because dealing 1 damage to a random enemy can be useful. But I think I'm going to go ahead and put this in the trash heap. It's a close call between bad and trash. 4 mana 2/6. Rip. This is a really interesting card, which I had to think about for quite a bit. If this were to see play, it would be seeing play in a deck that, of course, planned to use the hero power a lot. That would mean like Mage in particular, and I thought that this might see play in Echo Mage. But when I actually started to theorize about whether or not I could make it work, I started to become less convinced. So I'm going to put this in the good and has potential pile instead of the great pile, like I might have originally thought. Gadgets in Jouster. Sometimes it's 1 mana 1/2, sometimes it's a 2/3 in the decks that you would play Zombie Chow, so we'll trash that one. Garrison Commander, 2 mana 2/3 with a very solid ability. For those inspired type decks, I think it has potential. I'll put it in the good pile. Ghormach the Impaler, I think it's really, really difficult to put this in any deck. People keep mentioning Zoo, but I keep failing to see how you can actually reliably have 4 other minions. Yes, I know Implosion exists. Yes, I know Creeper exists. Yes, I know Imp Gang Boss exists. So I'm hesitating to put it in the it has potential and it's good, or it has potential and it's bad. I'm going to put in the bad and it has potential column. 6 mana 5/5, which draws a card. The Paladin random cards can have some really garbage cards. Turns out a 6 mana 5/5 draw a card might not have even been that good, so we'll toss that in the trash. Ice Howl. This one is interesting. Instant removal. I'm going to put it in the bad and interesting column. Ice Rager. Worth mentioning that just because a card is vanilla doesn't mean it's trash, but this card trades against, like, well, it loses against Mad Scientist and Shielded Minibot and a lot of 2/1s, so we're going to toss that in the trash. Injured Valdir, a 1 mana 2/1, and Priest would usually want to heal something for 3 and then still have it be damaged because of Live the Nar. So we'll toss that over there. Just a card, True Heart. I'm going to put this in the great column, which it's really more on the border, but I'll put it on the great column. I think it has a lot of potential, and it is slow to get going, but I think that there's going to be some decks which run it. I was kind of generous on the Justicar. Coda Rider, very, very, very slow. You do it on 8, and then you get a 6/10. I was thinking like, oh, could this possibly be buffed? But even on 8 mana, it's a 6/10. 8 mana 6/10, that's not too bad. You've got the Fencing Coach so that you can make it a 6 mana. On 6 mana, you get like a 6/10 worth of stuff. I'll put this in the bad and potential pile. I know it looks like it's like borderline trash, but I see a little tiny glimmer of potential in this card. This Inspire effect is too slow. Okay, this is possibly going to surprise people, but I'm going to put this in the good and potential column. Lance Carrier is really, really good and we'll see play in the specific Hobgoblin deck. 2 mana 3/4 with a Battle Cry of +2 attack. That's really good. Specifically in the Hobgoblin deck. 3 mana 4/3 can get tossed in the trash. Lily Squire, you may have practiced with it in the Brawl. The first Brawl with the Grand Tournament practice, and then it was in the Mage, and the Hunters would like have to Arcane Shot or deal with it, and it was like, oh man, maybe this will be good, but no, it's actually too slow, and the Brawl decks were really bad. Maiden of the Lake, I think that this deck, so when I first reviewed this deck, I was like, this card, I was like, oh yeah, it'll definitely see play in the Inspire Focus deck. At this point, I can definitely say that Inspire is more of a keyword like Battle Cry or Death Rattle, where I don't think you aim to make a deck focused on Inspire, but it's just nice to have a like side ability which does that. So Maiden of the Lake is less good in that respect, but it's still kind of valid because like on 4 mana you have a 2/6. That's not great, but hero ability is really useful. And if you play it on 5, if you are something like a 1/1 with it in Paladin, it's 5 mana 3/7, and that's acceptable. It's somewhere in the great or good category, and I'm going to toss it in the more potential, but it's almost a great card. It's a card that I'll be putting in probably specifically the Mage control deck, which I think will actually be a deck, but we'll talk more about that when we get there. Master Jouster, 6 mana 5/6, or if you want to joust, 6 mana 5/6 Taunt Divine Shield. Actually, I did look at Strafco's opinion, and I think he rated this as a great card, or even a good card, somewhere in here. I'm actually going to toss it in the trash, though. I don't think this has any chance. Like, the risk of missing the Joust and it just being a 6 mana 5/6, I don't think it's good. 3 mana 4/2, spell damage deck is not going to be a deck and will never be a deck, to my knowledge. I'll toss that in the trash. Mogre's Champion, a 6 mana 8/5, rip. Mookla's Champion, a 5 mana 4/3, rip. Next is Champion Sarad. This is one of those Inspire cards which was built so that you can play it on 5, and it's 4/5, and that's like at least somewhat reasonable. And if you do it on 7, and 7 mana 4/5, draw a card with the very heavy risk that it continues to draw. Like it's a threat that you have to deal with. Something that you would want to combo with Fencing Coach if you were to play a deck with Fencing Coach, perhaps. I'm gonna put this in the good category. It's slow, but I think it's got a lot of potential. Almost tempted to put it in the great category. North Sea Kraken is unfortunately too much mana and a little too slow. I mean, it's a fast card because the Battle Cry happens immediately, but it's not quite enough. I'm gonna toss this over in the trash pile. But it's a interesting card design. Pit Fighter, I was very tempted to put this in the good and has potential category. For a while I haven't been running Loatheb because it's a 5 mana 5/5 and it's like, well, that hero power, I mean that power of locking the opponent from spells versus 1 extra health. Not every deck out there runs Loatheb, and it's hard to imagine where Pit Fighter will pop in. Like certainly it's better than Loatheb against some decks. I do think it has some potential, like even though it's a vanilla card, but I'm just going to put it in the bad category. No trash, I think. It's going to be one of the top arena cards, and I don't think it's as easy as it's vanilla, it has no text, so therefore it's not constructed worthy. Very tempted to move it there, but I'll stick it in the bad column. Recruiter is too slow. Unlike Nexus Champion Sarad, you can actually kind of compare these two. Same stats, but a random spell is quite a bit better than the 2/2 Squire for 1 mana. At that point in the game. Refreshment Vendor. I'd mentioned I really looked forward to seeing this in the control decks, which don't worry about the health of the opponent. I think in those types of decks it's better than Earthen Ring Farseer, which has seen play every once in a while. So I'm going to put this in the... I'm almost wanting to put it in the great column, but I'm going to put it in the good and has potential column, because it probably doesn't belong in one of those. I'm not sure whether or not every deck which is control based will run it. Saboteur, 3 mana 4/3, turning off your opponent's hero power for turn shouldn't be a big deal. 6 mana 6/5. Whoosh. Almost tempted to put this into the bad category just because I was the one who revealed this card to the public. But it's so niche. Shade of Naxxramas, Gilbin, yeah. This Inspire effect I like a lot. Very basic, but powerful enough. It's got the 3 mana 3/3, which is reasonable to play on 3, and then it's a big threat. If you play it with the hero power, in just Paladin for example, you get 2 1/1s, and that's like a 5 mana 5/5. And even better because the recruits are actually real threats because of the threat of Quartermaster. I don't know if I originally might have like had this as somewhat bad, but now I have this somewhere in between good and great. I'm gonna put it into the good and that has potential category. Sky Captain Crag. Basically, if you just get this down to a 5 mana 4/6 charge, it's alright. Not too hard to imagine that you would get 2 pirates in play. Not too hard to imagine you get 3 pirates in play. Like you can even play a 1 mana pirate and then play the Sky Captain. Play this for 4 mana basically if you already have to. I'm gonna put it in the bad, and it has like some potential category instead of just trashing it. 6 mana 7/4, which has the potential to go back to your hand, but sometimes doesn't. We'll toss that in the trash. This one is the filler, the funny card, has some potential bolster, but no. Tournament Medic, if the meta ever gets super aggressive, this is obviously a really slow card and really good against 1 health minions. Has potential there. I'm going to put it in the bad category with some very, very like fringe potential to be played. This card is what the dragon decks needed to be, like have the 4 connection. They had the it's kind of difficult to survive sometimes as dragons. You needed just a few more dragons. I think this one pushes things into viability. 4 mana 3/6 taunt, exactly what dragon decks needed. Great card. Varian Rin, oh man. Oh, now we're going to the class cards. So Varian Rin, that's going to be a huge card for the control decks. Really top-notch card. Some people are again like scared of the battle cries, but 10 mana 7/7, draw 3 cards is great. Put him into the battlefield, that's great. Sparring Partner, this is a well-designed card, but I don't really see the bolster deck working, and I don't think that'll actually work. It has combos with Black Knight, yes, but I don't really see any type of warrior needing a 2 mana 3/2 card with Taunt. Very, very fair card, and even a good card, but it's just because it doesn't fit into any archetypes, and having seen all the cards, I don't see an archetype forming where you're going to want to be taunting things. Sea Reaver, a lot of comparisons to Flame Leviathan. It's a better Flame Leviathan in some ways, but it only damages your own minions. Foosh. Doesn't even activate the patrons when you want it to. Not reliable in any way. Orgrimmar Aspirant. A fair card, but fair cards don't cut it in Constructed. You can't really have this guy stay, and the warrior hero power has the least effect on the board. Really doesn't synergize with this. Toss that in the fire. Magnetor Alpha stats are too weak. King's Defender. They tried to make Taunt a thing, but I kind of said that a 3/3 weapon wasn't that good. But it turns out it's pretty good in some classes, but not in Warrior, because Warrior's weapons are amazing. So we're going to actually trash this. Bolster. I want to put it in the trash, but somewhere I'm a little afraid that it's actually going to be a 2 mana +4/+4. Like, it's sitting next to the Sparring Partner. Clearly some theme was trying to be set up here, but I don't see a warrior taunt deck cropping up here. Bash. I actually have a slightly positive view on this. 2 mana, deal 3 damage is thought to be fairly reasonable, so you're paying 1 mana for the extra 3 armor. You can do Bash Shield Slam to take out 2 medium cards. Hard to find a deck for this, but I'm going to put it into the it has potential, and it's clearly costed competitively. I don't think Bash belongs in the trash. It's somewhere in the line of here, or even here, so I think it's like here actually. Alexstrasza's Champion is pretty interesting. 2 mana 3/3 of charge is clearly very good. Right above you can actually see the Twilight Guardian, so the dragon decks are really a thing. But the question is, which deck do you want the 2 mana 3/3 in? There is this kind of like mid-rangey dragon deck which could appear where Alexstrasza's Champion is good. You don't want the Champion in a control deck. 3/3 charge against like Mad Scientists and like things with 2/2s or 2/3s are really good, but control versus control, the 3/3 charge isn't really that useful. I'm gonna put this into the it's good and has potential category. If it fit into a deck, it'd be really good. I don't think it fits into any dragon deck, as they tend to be more controlling. If there was such a thing as a aggro dragon deck, then Alexstrasza's Champion would be good, but I don't think something like that can be formed. It compares a lot to Fiery War Axe, but Fiery War Axe is probably better for the control decks. Do you need more Fiery War Axes? Maybe, kind of. So it has potential, and it's a good card, but yeah. Basically, Warrior's got a very good tool for the control warrior. Bash has some chance of making it in. Alexstrasza's Champion has some chance of making it into a control warrior dragon deck, but I'm not even sure if this fits into the control warrior dragon deck. I don't think the bolster deck is real. The Sparring Partner is costed appropriately enough that it has potential even without bolster combos. Yes, this can combo with Black Knight also, but I don't really see that as being that useful a combo. And bolster I'm just going to put in the bad but interesting category, because it is interesting and has potential to be 2 mana +4/+4, which is good, but meh. The Warlock cards. Wrathguard, I think overall Warlocks didn't get that much, but we'll look at this more at the end. Wrathguard, 2 mana 4/3, that's competitive. I'm not even sure if it'll make the zoo cut, but it's certainly going to be tried out, and then we'll see just how bad that drawback is. 2 mana 4/3 is pretty sweet. I'll put it in the good category and interesting. Wilfred Fizzlebag. I had originally thought of this as trash, but the Fencing Coach brings this to an interesting card. I would say that if you have a deck with Wilfred Fizzlebag in it, you absolutely must put Fencing Coach in it. And I think this actually has a chance of being in handlock now. 6 mana 5/4. Ugh. 2 mana 3/2 with a mechanic that isn't actually being used right now. I'll toss that in the fire. Warlocks in general, because they're in a pretty good spot, you can kind of see they got a lot of cards which are like weird or fringe. I'll toss the Fist of Draxus in the trash, the 7 mana 6/8 like kind of filler card. Bane of Doom buff, you'll see it a lot from Bane of Doom, but you won't see it in play in Constructed. This card, Steed, is an interesting card. I hoped that Warlocks would get more cards like this, which are like bad but interesting. They have some potential. I actually think this deck, this card really has some potential. So we're not going to trash it, even though it like kind of belongs in the trash to some extent, but it has some potential. Oh, Demon Fuse. Rip, rip, rip. Dark Bargain is, again, borderline trash and bad, but those decks where you empty your hand and then you Dark Bargain them, that could be a thing. So, as you can see, Warlocks didn't get much, which is not a surprise. I think they're a class that was in a good spot. And when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about the class cards in specific, because the neutral cards could fit into quite a few of the decks as well, or create new ones. So, Warlocks get this Wrathguard, which is good in Zoo or aggressive Warlock decks. Wilfred Fizzlebang has potential in a control Warlock deck with the Fencing Coach. Steed, give it a try, could be the next Grim Patron. I'm not really feeling it, but good luck with that. Dark Bargain, I actually think it does have potential. But it's so clunky with the Doom Guards already wanting to be discarded. Alright, Shaman. Tuskar Totemic. I think this one is actually borderline great and good. The totem is, you can consider it to be worth 2 mana, in which case this is a 1 mana 3/2, and you'd be like, oh, this is really good. But the hero power isn't really worth 2 mana. It's worth less than that, but maybe not that much less. You get the chance of drawing the Totem Golem, or the Flame Tongue, or the Mana Tide 3 out of 8 times, so I think it's borderline here. I think it'll, the fact that the Shaman deck doesn't have the 3-drop is probably what pushes this to be great. Wouldn't be surprised if it actually stopped seeing play in mid-range Shaman, but for now, I will put this in the great category. Totem Golem, really good for the mid-range Shaman and even some other aggressive Shamans. Get that board control early, 2 mana 3/4. Wins against every single 2-drop, except a very select few which aren't being played. Only that Zoo deck, potential Wrathguard, might fight the Totem Golem. That's really good. Thunderbluff Valiant. This card can be played on 5 mana, and then be a 6 health card, and that can last. It's a repeatable Bloodlust. It's like Quartermaster, except like it keeps being a threat. You can play this on 7 with a totem, and it's just like Quartermaster. Really good, I'd say. The Mistcaller. Turns out that you basically need to play like 4 cards before this is worth it, or 3 cards. Really slow, but an interesting card. Everyone overrates this. I'm gonna put it in the bad and interesting card. Healing Wave, I think this one's got potential in perhaps a Ancestral Call combo deck, perhaps whenever the metagame gets too aggressive. Make a Hunter's Cry that you're cheating when you heal for 14, fantastic. Elemental Destruction, this is really borderline bad, but it fits in the same deck that a Healing Wave card fits in, I think. Specifically, I think these 2 cards might make a very specific Ancestors Call Malagos type deck. If it doesn't, then these 2 cards are both going to belong in the bad but interesting column, but because I'm kind of hopeful, and because these 2 do have like some legitimacy in control decks, I'm going to put them in good, both of them. Draenei Totem Carver, 4 mana 5/5, I wasn't even sure if that was going to be good. I was tempted to put this in the trash, but I think it has some possibilities. You're going to want to play this as a 5/5 or a 6/6, 7/7, you get into the BGH range. Unless you know the deck you're playing against doesn't have BGH. Even though there's all these totem synergies, which is good, I think the Totem Carver will probably not make the cut for that deck, but it could. And if it does, then fine. I'll put this in the bad category. Has some potential. Charged Hammer? I think this is far too slow, but when you think of the Shadow Form ability kind of getting lumped into this, it's like a 1 mana 2/4, which is obviously insane, but Shadow Form is a bad card. So maybe you think of Shadow Form as 2 cards. It's like a 2 mana 2/4, which is actually pretty good still, but it's just like the combination of that you had to use 4 charges. Yes, you can override it with a weapon. Anyways, I'm going to put it in the bad but interesting category because like I see some potential for this, but you know, honestly mostly trash, but I'm going to just say it's bad and has like some potential. Ancestral Knowledge, I really think again this should have been 1 Overload, in which case I would put it in the great category. 2 Overload matches puts it like all the way into almost the trash bin, but just because shamans don't have any card draw, and just because the aggressive shamans are running like Lava Burst still, like this has some potential. Lava Shock likes it, then it's 2 mana draw too. Bad but interesting. Basically, shamans are the big winner. All of these tools make it really useful for, I think mid-range shaman comes back in a big way because you're getting 3 cards: Thunderbluff Valiant, Totem Golem, and Teskar Totemic. Some more shaman possibilities with Elemental Destruction and Healing Wave for the combo decks that can take advantage of this Joust and just clearing the board with no real. And even these 4 bad cards have some potential to them. A lot of people are hyped about the Mist Color in particular. Rogue. 2 mana, 3/2, deal 1 down. It's definitely a good card. I'd say it's got potential. Not gonna see play in everything. I'm not even sure if it'll see play, but it's a strong card. Really good against aggro. I'm not sure Shady Dealer makes the cut in the pirate decks. To have the hope of having a pirate out just so you can play a 3 mana 5/4. Borderline trash. I'll toss it in the trash. Could have some potential. Trash. Shadowpan Rider. I was tempted to put this in the great category in the initial review, but now that we see that the Control Rogue deck didn't quite get enough cards to justify this kind of like just big minion thing, I'm gonna just put it in the good and has potential category. I don't think that Rogue's got enough tools to break out of their like mostly 1 deck version of Oil Rogue. There's no real Control Rogue, and I had hoped that they would put enough cards out there. And there are more cards. Oh my gosh, Poison Blade. There are more cards that do help with the Control Rogue. Cut Purse 2 mana 2/2, not good enough, but I just don't think they got enough tools. Burgle was one card that I thought if Control Rogue were a thing, then this card might see some play. But since I don't think Control Rogue becomes a thing, and the 2 random class cards are a lot worse than Thoughtsteal, and Thoughtsteal isn't being run that much right now, it's in the bad but interesting category. Buccaneer, I actually think this card has some potential in the pirate decks. The pirate synergy cards right now, there aren't that many. There's only Ship's Cannon, and there's the 3/3 which buffs pirates. But it might be good enough. If a pirate deck were like in the meta right now, I would put this in the good category, and it has potential. It doesn't right now, so I'm going to put in the bad category as potential. There's not really enough pirate synergy out there. I had hoped that the cards like Cut Purse would have a pirate tag on them, and the Shady Dealer. Beneath the Grounds, this card has some potential in the Control Rogue deck, where you want to draw it out. It has some potential in the Mill Rogue deck. I'm not entirely sure whether or not this will be the card that lets those work, but it has some potential. I'm going to say it's a good card and has potential. Just because the value out of it is potentially insane. 3 mana for 3/4/4s. Even a 3 mana for a 4/4 is reasonable, especially in a control deck, but sometimes the 3 mana do nothing, and it takes a while to get going. Really, it could be in the bad category also, but I'm going to be optimistic about this one. Anubarak, 9 mana 8/4. Well, yeah. I would have loved to put this in the potential category for badness, but I think it's so weak, and you can't spend the 9 mana for an 8/4, and even if you do, and you do get it to return, it's like, I'm going to spend 9 mana again for an 8/4. We trashed the Anubarak very sadly. So overall, Rogues get some Control elements, they get some pirate synergy, but I don't think the pirate synergy is enough to boost them into using pirates. They get some control synergy in Burgle, Shadowpan Rider, Undercity, Valiant, and Beneath the Grounds, which might be enough to push that deck a little bit, but ultimately I still think that the Oil Rogue version, which is basically a control deck, is still better. So Rogues didn't get much. I don't think enough to make a new deck. Wyrmrest Agent, a good priest card. 2 mana, 2/4 taunt. It does require the dragon, which is a little bit difficult when you're playing a card this early. You have the natural synergy of the turn 2 Wyrmrest Agent, turn 3 Blackwing Technician, turn 4 the new dragon 3/6 taunt, turn 5 you play the Corruptor, deal 3. That really could be a deck. I'm hopeful it has potential, and it's a good strong card onto, where a priest needed that mana cost. I'm just not putting it in great because I'm not that sold on a priest dragon deck working, but this is, along with the other dragons in the set, has some potential to give priest another deck in the dragon version. Spawn of Shadows, 4 mana, 5/4. There's no such thing as an aggressive priest deck. Trash. Shadow Fiend, this one has potential, 3 mana, 3/3. Priests do have a lot of cards in the 3 mana slot though, so tough to find space for it. But it is a threat that continues to give. In a format where they're already not running Dark Cultist, 3 mana, 3/4, with a really strong death rattle, it's hard to see Shadow Fiend making it, but it does have the potential to be quite strong. Powered Glory has potential against aggressive decks. If the format were ever to be really, really aggressive, then Priest now has the tools to utterly destroy them with cards like Powered Glory. But given that the decks you see are generally varied, I don't really see Powered Glory being a mainstay in any deck. Holy Champions, some people have been thinking like this would be the card to put priests in the like have a big finisher. Sometimes you finish them with like a 15/2 Light Warden, if only it had more health. Holy Champion has that health, but I'm not really that optimistic that it'll stay, because on the first turn you play it, it is only 4 mana, 3/5, and it still only has 5 health even if you play it later on, but it has like some potential, I'd say. Flash Heal, very similar to Powered Glory in the sense of it's not better than Light of the Naru in most cases, and I had been toying around with the idea that priests do some sick combo with the Flash Heals and the Akanai Soul Priests and doubling with Valen, but it seems like a weak one-turn kill deck as opposed to, say, Patron or Freeze Mage. Those are more consistent, I'd say. But it has like some very, very small potential, I'd say. Convert costs too much. You're going to be converting a card that costs more than 3 mana, and then you should just play Faceless instead. There's some people who say, oh, I mean, it's got potential because you can actually hold the card, you pay the 2 mana, but you have to like play the card, and it's really hard still, and it's too slow. Trash. Confuse, it's a cool card, but its effect is far too limited. Some people theorize that it can be used for Mass Inner Fire, but I don't really see that as working. Trash that one. Confessor Pale Tress. This card is one of the cards that Fencing Coach pulls from the trash category into like it has some potential. If you play the Fencing Coach on the turn prior, and then on turn 7 you play this and you do the hero power, then you get a 5/4 and a random legendary, and in that case, like, that's pretty strong. So I'm going to put this into the good, and it has potential. You would play this almost certainly with Fencing Coach. Even if you don't draw Fencing Coach and you get to the late game, which Priest tends to do, then you can get the 9 mana Pale Tress hero power turn. You compare this a lot to Sneeds, which isn't being run but saw some play. I'm going to say this has potential, and in a good way. So priests end up getting like cute tricks and Flash Heal and Powered Glory, which will make it so that they'll be strong if everyone in the game is playing aggro, which is hard to see. Holy Champion has some outside chance of being good, but I don't really see it. Hard to combo this because you can't charge the Holy Champion as priest, and defending 5 health turns out to be a challenge. It's kind of the same reason why a card like Questing Adventure isn't good. It just starts off weak even though it has a lot of upside. Shadow Fiend is a good card, but it fights so strongly for the 3-drop slot. Confessor Paletress has some potential to be a cleaner upper for the priest. I don't see you replacing Ysera with it, and you always had mind control, but this card has the potential to like just be in the control priest decks and just get a lot of value. I like her. Wormrust Agent possibly creates a new type of priest deck with dragons. Kind of like a tempo dragon deck. Priest can keep the big dragons healed. 2/4 with taunt into a 3/5 into a 4/6 with taunt. And you have the priest hero power behind it. I think that could be a deck. Warhorse Trainer, the paladin side. It's Direwolf Alpha with 2 extra health and an extra mana. It hits all the recruits, but very tempted to put it in the trash, but just because there's so many things that might make more Silverhand recruits. I'm going to just put it into the bad and has potential, but this is like really towing the line. Tusker Jouster, love this card. It'll replace the anti-kill bots, possibly. I'm going to be a pretty big fan of running 2 of these. The mid-range paladin deck that I'm running right now, like I would be strongly considering like cutting the heal bot and then putting in the 2 Jousters and then putting something else. It has a slight problem of the current mid-range paladin deck often runs 2 Chows and like 2 shielded mid-bot, 2 knife juggler. But against an aggressive deck, you'll still win a fair amount of the jousts. And against control decks, you usually don't need the heal, and a 5-mana 5/5 is pretty good. It's great. Far too slow, or not too slow. It's a fast card, but far too much mana, I should say. Seal of Champions. Though to be fair, if it costs 2 mana, it would probably be OP. Mysterious Challenger. An interesting card. I'm going to say it has potential, but I'm actually not even going to put it in the good category. It does have 6 mana, 6/6, but I just don't see the secrets being worth running just so you can get the Mysterious Challenger out. Pretty much the only secrets even worth running right now are Avenge. There is a world where you play this and you get like so much value, but you have to put so many bad secrets in your deck to do that. It's slow to play. I think it's an interesting card. It has potential, almost to the point of it's good and has potential, but I really don't see this coming. Murloc Knight. This card I actually think has potential. It's not obviously great, but it's very similar to the 3-mana 3/3, which is Inspire, summon a 1/1. For 1 extra mana, you get 1 extra health, and a random Murloc is a lot better than the 1/1. This card could even make it into the great category. I think it's just one of those things that require seeing for yourself first. A lot of people are like, oh man, Paladin Murloc deck, but no. I don't think a Paladin Murloc deck is going to be a thing, but this card could just be good for the value. It could be great for the value. I'm even a little bit torn on moving it into that section, but I'm going to just leave it in the same section as the Regent instead. Enter the Colosseum. Very big control element. I think it's bad and has potential for those control decks which are usually looking to clear the board. Usually you would use Equality. I think it's less good than Brawl. Of course, except the specific case where you want to have one of your guys still standing. It might cost too much. It always leaves their best minion, usually. Tough one to evaluate, but I'll call it bad, but has potential. Eadric the Pure. I think it costs too much. I'm not going to put it in the trash. I'm going to put it in the bad and has potential category. This one's going to be a tough one. I hope it's not the next Dr. Boom. I don't think it will be. 7 mana for 3/7 of stats with the Elder Peacekeeper effect. Just play Elder Peacekeeper. Competitive Spirit. 1 mana, basically give your minions +1/+1. That's how it's going to come down to a lot of the time. Avenge is way better, I think. Avenge isn't being run. The Competitive Spirit, Muster for Battle Double Down Dream. It's going to happen every once in a while, but that's the dream. Argent Lance, 2 mana 2/2, which can be a 2 mana 2/3. No. Okay, so Paladins get some interesting cards. Warhorse Trainer, Mysterious Challenger, Serious Challenger has the potential to make a deck with secrets work. Enter the Colosseum has the potential to be a good control card. Yadric the Pure has the potential to be like a mainstay in control decks, but I still think it's too slow to work. I almost want to put it here just to not be laughed at when it's actually good. Like, some people have made the argument that Yadric the Pure is good just because there's no good 7-drops. I better put it here just to not get laughed at in the future. Now, I couldn't see myself running it. That's a tough call. We can get laughed at with that later. Anyways, Murloc Knight has the potential to get a lot of value. Tuskar Jouster, just a very solid card. So, I think what Paladins get is mainly Tuskar Jouster, and the Murloc Knight can fit into quite a lot of their decks. Might even just fit into mid-range Paladin. It's going to be tough, though, to justify both of the 3-mana and 3/3 Inspire summon a 1/1 as well as this card. Spellslinger, it's got potential. 3-mana, 3/4, good stats. Hard to say whether or not it'll make the cut in all the tempo decks. Ronin, insane. That's value. Gives the tempo mages a chance to like win even in the late game with the missiles and the Archmage Antonidas. Pretty good in control as well, just as your big card. Polymorph Boar, very flexible card. Has some potential in the aggressive decks. You're usually running Arcane Golem to finish them if you're super fast, though there is no mage deck that currently uses that, but there used to be a super aggressive mage deck. I think it's somewhere between the good and bad. Very cool card design. And it has the ability to get rid of taunts and whatnot. I'll go ahead and put that in the good category. Flame Lance, absolute garbage. Fallen Hero, I think this one's great, and Fallen Hero you can coin out on turn 1, then you can just turn 2, kill their, or threaten their 2 health minion. Works really well with more Fallen Heroes also, just really Death Star people. Effigy, I think is a borderline great or good card. I'll go ahead and put it in the great category. Tempo Mages found it difficult to find a 3rd secret in the counterspell. Effigy has potential to fill up the counterspell slot much faster. You play it with a Sludge Belcher, you get a 5-mana value card. Another excellent secret to dig up with Mad Scientist. 4-mana 3/5 with that Inspire effect, that's not enough. Interestingly enough, well, Coldarra Drake, for anyone who played the Brawl, you'll know that the Coldarra Drake, Maiden of the Lake, Fallen Hero, Nexus Champion Sarad Dream is real. And I actually think that will be a deck. I think that's a legitimate deck. But it's going to be tough to see whether or not that deck is actually good enough. And it's actually tough to see whether or not the Coldarra Drake will fit into that deck. Or maybe you just rather have the 2-mana 2/3, because using your hero power twice is usually good enough. So I'm going to put it over here. It has some potential in a Dragon Mage deck as well, which could be a thing. So mages are getting like a lot of new possibilities, which is really cool. They have the Inspire possibility, they have the Frost Giant possibility, they have more control possibilities as well, and they have this Dragon possibility. Arcane Blast, neat card, but just doesn't do enough. And even the Aggro Mage gets some love with the Polymorph Boar and the Spellslinger, and the Effigy works in both the control and the aggro. So, mages got a lot of fun things, and also Inspire works really well with mages. Stable Master, 3-mana 4/2 in a pushing the beast control theme. This wasn't enough of a push, and having looked at all the other cards, there's not enough that pushes this into being good enough, I'd say. Wrangler, I actually think this card could see some serious play because the random beast you get is really good. It's difficult to play both a beast and a Wrangler at the same time because Wrangler just costs so much. Web Spinner would be the easiest way, but because of another hunter card that's coming up, the Elec, it's kind of hard to justify putting the Web Spinner in your deck as well. That said, though, I think that Wrangler might see play in this beast deck. It has a lot of value, a lot of potential value. Expected value-wise, the card is good. Power Shot, I think this is a really good control hunter tool. glad they printed a card that pushes another variety of Hunter. In fact, this is going to be a common theme. Their Hunter basically got nothing for aggression, but they did get a lot of cool twos. Lock and Load. This card has seen a lot of variance in how people have rated it. The Brawl deck mostly had things to take advantage of Lock and Load with Arcane Shot and Tracking and Hunter's Mark. I do believe that the Lock and Load deck would run that. What the Brawl didn't have was Power Shot, which I think is a really critical tool. I like Lock and Load a lot. It's worth mentioning that I think Tempo Storm might have misevaluated this card. They ranked it a trash card, which was a surprise to me. I think this could spawn the Control Hunter deck. I'm going to even put this in the great category. There's the thought that, oh, you're getting random Hunter cards which don't even really know what they're going to be, but just the sheer volume of cards that you're going to get, it has the potential to be really, really good. They might not have seen the Control Hunter, but Control Hunter was very close to being a thing before this expansion. And I think with cards like Power Shot and Lock and Load, that might be the thing necessary to pull it through. King's Elec as well, that's a great card. 2 mana, 3/2 beast, and has the potential to draw a card. Some deck builders have explored the idea of running just like 2 King's Elecs, or even 1 King's Elec, and then this could be one of the first tutor cards out there. Because if you were to only put in 1 big card in your deck, then King's Elec will almost always win the Joust, and then you get that card. That's just a potential deck. Might even be with the Lock and Load type deck. Even in just a mid-range deck, sometimes you'll draw your Savannah Highmane, or Sludge Belcher, or Dr. Boom, and it'll be great. And if you don't, then it's 2 mana, 3/2, and maybe you'll draw the card like 30 to 50% of the time, but really good the times you draw it, so great card. Dreadscale, that's a great card. Another Control Hunter card. Really, really good card. Repeatable Whirlwind. That's fantastic. Triggers your own Acolyte of Pain as well, which was something Control Hunters needed. And it's a shame that it's a legendary, because you can only run 1 copy. Brave Archer, this was like the bone that Blizzard tossed to the face hunters. They're like, hey, we're not only making Control Hunter cards, see, we made Brave Archer too. But rip Brave Hunter. Brave Archer, rip. It's less good than Leopard Gnome. Bear Trap, that's a great trap. I expect to see this trap everywhere. Really good Control Hunter card because you protect your face and you get a 2 mana 3/3. Obvious inclusion almost. Matches with the Freezings, like some snakes if you're playing taunts. Mad Scientist value. Lock and Load, Bear Trap, that fits as a trap. This is a trap that's good enough to just play on its own. Ball Spiders cost too much. Acid Maul. I'm not even sure this would be good if it were a 5 mana card. Alright, so basically the big winner is Control Hunter. I think it has the potential and has the cards necessary with Power Shot, with Bear Trap, with Dreadscale, with King's Elec, with Lock and Load. I think this is a deck to watch out for. Wrangler has some interesting potential, possibly even in the Control Hunter deck, but maybe more in the mid-range deck. Druids got a lot of kind of beast synergy, and now that we see all the cards, I don't think the beast synergy was pushed hard enough to be a serious contender. So most of these beast synergy cards I'm going to put in the bad but potential column. So we have the 4 mana, potentially 4/7, but it just turns out that there's not quite enough good beasts, I think, in the Druid. Savage Combatant, that's a great beast, but there's not enough beast synergy to really push it over the top, I'd say. And unfortunately, this card does fail the beats a Piloted Shredder test, and there's so many cards on 4 between Piloted Shredder, Swipe, and Keeper of the Grove that's hard to fit Savage Combatant in. So instead of being great, it kind of becomes good. Because I'm not even sure if this will see play. Mulch. Difficult to see whether or not Mulch will see play either. It is better sap, but it costs 1 more. And it's difficult to know whether or not Druids needed a sap. Druids have traditionally been weak in removal, so I actually think this is a good card with a lot of potential. Just Probably needs to see some kind of testing to see whether or not it actually fits into mid-range Druid. You could usually like get past taunts anyways because you would just silence them, so mulch might be redundant, but we'll put it here anyways. Living Roots. It's not an insane card, but obviously the card is costed pretty well. It's somewhere between a great card and a good card with potential, because even though it's costed well, I'm not entirely sure it sees a addition to a deck, just because a 1-mana card that doesn't have a huge effect might not justify running it as a card. I'm going to put it in the like borderline great good category, but like it has to slide in one direction. I'll put it in the great category. I'll slide it into the good category. I think a great card is like, oh yeah, it'll definitely be run. If I'm not sure whether or not it'll be run, I probably should put it in the good category. The Chow replacement sometimes, yes, but Chow is arguably sometimes better also. And Chow is sometimes not being run, often not being run. Now the Wild, this is one of the cards that had the Beast deck in mind for the synergy, but it just wasn't pushed hard enough. It needs to be 5 mana 6/6 to be reasonable, which means you have to have it in your hand, and then you summon 2 beasts. That's kind of difficult to do. And the beasts that you do aren't that great. The other card, which has beast synergy, is the Snake. Yeah, I just don't think it's pushed quite hard enough to be a deck. Well, I mean, Night of the Wild will never be good enough with the beast synergy, but like Windwalker, that's the card that, if there were better beasts, I think could be good enough. Drew the Saber, it's one of the beast cards that was being pushed. Obviously a fair card. 3/2 with stealth. It's kind of nice. 2/1 with charge is an alright option that you would exercise sometimes. But because the Druid beast deck isn't there, it's just in the bad and has potential pile. Darnassus Aspirant, everyone says it's great. It's because it is. I think this is one of the deceptive cards. It at first looks absolutely insane, but I think the more you play with it, it's possibly going to move into more of the good category. It's not a completely insane card, because you play it on turn 2, pretty much the common thing that's going to happen is that they're going to kill it. It's almost like if you have Darnassus Aspirant and you have Wild Growth in your hand, you probably usually cast the Wild Growth, unless you knew you were up against a deck that, or a board that Darnassus Aspirant might work against. Anyways, it's a great card. Aviana, really interesting card. Gonna put it in the bad, but has potential. One interesting thing is that if you Emperor Thaurissan Aviana, your minions still cost 1, but it's almost like Emperor Thaurissan reduces another card by like a full mana. Like, the way to think about it is, if you play Emperor Thaurissan and Aviana costs 8, then you can also play another one of your big minions. So like Ysera, it still costs 1, but you can actually play Ysera along with another big card at 10 mana. Anyways, it's probably too slow, but it is an interesting card. Astro Communion, this is a really interesting card. It's probably bad, and it might even be trash, but it has some potential. It's gonna be a very swingy card. You play it early on with Innervate, and then you top deck the Ancient of Lore, and you usually win, I'd say. So that could be a deck. So overall, Druids get a bunch of beast synergy, which I don't think is enough to make the deck happen. They get some fun tools like Living Roots, which is nice. Mulch is nice. Darnassus Aspirant will probably see play in most Druid decks. That's something they get. And Savage Combatant is obviously costed very, very competitively, and is also a beast. So that's a really nice bone to throw to the Druids. It's just that it costs 4 mana. And if the beast deck were a thing, this would definitely see play. I'm not sure it'll see play, but it's got potential. $18 cards that I think are great, really strong. 30 cards that I think have strong potential, and 29 cards that I think have some weak potential, which means that I threw 55 cards in the trash. That's not too bad. I mean, I think that's something that could be improved on. Like, I want to put more cards in the bad but interesting category, like cards that have small potential. Like, I can understand throwing some cards in the trash, but I would hope not to throw away that many next time. So, to recap, I think the big winners here are the Control Hunter deck. I think it's got a real potential to spring up a new deck, and I love that. The mid-range Shaman deck could come roaring back on the backs of those totem-powered cards. I think Control Mage has a reasonable chance of getting a lot of cool tools. I'm interested to see whether or not they manage to work the Frost Giant in there. Decks that use the hero power a good amount, such as Paladin, get some fun new toys. In my opinion, Inspire is going to be treated more like a bonus, like Death Rattle or Battle Cry, in the sense that you're not supposed to make a Battle Cry or Death Rattle deck, but it's just a nice bonus. It's kind of a mechanic that is attached to some things. The closest you'll get to an Inspire deck is probably exactly that Mage control deck, and possibly the Paladin control deck. Maybe something with Warlocks. Control decks in general will be getting pretty good tools, and also the format might just change to be a little bit less aggressive due to cards such as Bear Trap being good and Totem Golem being good, although Totem Golem might be aggressive also. You have the slowdown cards from some classes as well. Some big health minions are out there. Refreshments for everyone in the vendor. 3/6 taunt and all the dragon decks. It seems like a lot of things got a little bit of an anti-aggro. And if the format ever became really aggro, some of the cards in the bad but has potential slot really can shine. The fact that Control Warrior got such a sexy legendary in Varian Rin might just mean that we see more Control Warrior. Control Warrior naturally can tech pretty heavily against aggressive decks, so it's just, even though it might not look like there are that many anti-aggro cards, just the addition of one card into some decks, small things like that will do a lot to shift the meta, and if there's less aggro, then indeed the inspired decks are going to have a higher chance of coming through. If there are almost no aggro decks, then even some of the inspire cards that were more questionable will become viable to some extent. And you might actually see even more inspire, since those are where you get the value over time. If tempo were ever to become less important, then that'll happen. And then just the card True Heart, you get the true value out of that. And even that Shaman card, which is really slow, could get the play. The Mist Caller. It's coming. Alright, well there you have it.